Oh, yeah. That's my little sausage.
Yes, it's actually moving, I believe. Like the flames just want they got up into a...
Can you get up,
the steelwork in great shape. It's all the same. Maybe what's the problem is about the title trailer. How it fits in, you just want to see it. I know this, I actually know that the Germans use this as a white reconnaissance vehicle. It's a slightly larger, superb restoration. It wasn't run last week because they hadn't run the engine in last week, but this week they've been running the engine in. It's powered by a 6-cylinder Maybach engine, and it's really a 3/4 track. So this is built on the D7 chassis, which is a 1-ton chassis. It doesn't appear in our programme, and I think this is a very late edition. The owner was quite disappointed in the display. Seeing it here today, so we're all very very rare vehicle. As I say, it was used as a reconnaissance vehicle. More than the 251 personnel carrier. But the 251 market version is anti-aircraft carrying vehicle. This particular vehicle is 250 Farmer. The later American half-tracks, well not later, but the American half-tracks did have a driven front axle, which meant if you're off the track or both tracks, at least you could drive the vehicle, get the vehicle. We brought all our technical books on Russian and modern armour, and infantry, a particular vehicle we can't hear particularly well in from the commentary point, how very quiet this vehicle is. And the whole point of a reconnaissance vehicle is that it's quiet. It's the game away.
Just as a matter of interest, Bob, you're saying the front axle on that's not driven. Do the rear tracks brake steer as well?
Yes, they do. Yeah. Once it goes beyond a certain angle, the tracks start to steer.
The Second World War, during the early 1950s, after the end of the First World War, the Russians themselves stopped building T-34s, but with the establishment of the communist regimes in Czechoslovakia, the Nikolin M34 aircraft engine now is a very, very straightforward conversion from petrol to diesel. Actually, they just very quickly changed the cylinder heads and not much else. And hence you had a 500 horsepower diesel instead of the 850, 900 horsepower petrol aircraft engine. This is as what we've seen before, and this is not strictly a World War II vehicle. It's built on the hull and chassis of the T-34 tank, And the Russians themselves did, I think, very much to what they're building on the chassis of the T-34. Virtually all their fitting was plate over the top, and just used this tax to build the pieces on the front. Well, it means certain sort of character-forming moments, and it hasn't wanted to steer right for quite some time. But we actually go and do it. Anyway, Brian's going for another trundle round. You can see that the driver has got just about 30 minutes of just about a foot wide to here. So we are very heavily dependent on your co-driver at the bottom.
This particular vehicle, I actually purchased this from the Egyptian Army in 1986. Yes, this particular vehicle I bought from the Egyptian Army in 1986 and is now in the markings of the Polish Army post-war. The chassis is an IS-2 chassis, and the ISU 152 refers to the calibre of the gun it carries, and this particular type of vehicle was designed in about 18 days in 1943 because the Russians needed a self-propelled. They needed as many self-propelled guns as they could find and could build, and so this vehicle was actually designed in about 18 days. It's a very simple vehicle. From the construction point of view, there's just flat plates that make up the superstructure. The most difficult thing of this vehicle for the driver is to actually get into his driving position. He has to climb over all the gun controls and the elevating and traversing navigators, whether it was a Tiger, King Tiger, a Panther, a tremendous weight cartridge and projectile. I was hoping that we'd have the wartime production figures for this vehicle, but we don't. But I know there was 8,000 to 10,000 of them built. And you can imagine what the German forces must have gone through in 1944 and 1945 when thousands of these particular vehicles were coming across the steppes into Poland and into eastern Germany. And because these weren't vehicles in the front line, they tended not to get knocked out. We have my M36. This particular vehicle was until last November in the Serb Army, and in fact the flag flying on the vehicle is a Serb Army flag. The crew in the vehicle are actually fitted out in Serb Army uniforms. These vehicles, some of these vehicles were actually seen leaving Kosovo several weeks ago when they were withdrawn after the peace treaty. The M36 is a 90mm gun motor carriage, was designed in 1944 by the Americans. It was actually built on an M10 chassis, but they wanted a bigger gun, a 90mm gun, and so they designed it for it to take the 90mm gun and put the turret straight onto the M10 chassis. You may wonder what on earth all the rubber is hanging around the vehicle. This is protection against infantry-fired RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades. And it's very, very effective, so effective in fact that the British Army were considering at one point actually putting this rubber belting on British armoured vehicles. I've seen a film taken in Bosnia during the war in 1991 of an ammunition train. In fact, it was the armoured train with the M18 Hellcat on it. And the ammunition train, or coach, was actually covered in this belting and was hit with an RPG. And the belting actually dissipated the energy from the projectile and none of the ammunition exploded, so it does actually work. They've also covered trucks, have also been, even soft-skin trucks have been covered in this belting, and it is very effective. It's very unusual to see this kind of protection, but this is definitely although it's a 1945 vehicle, this vehicle was used until 1995. It was at a base called Lesenica, about 5 miles from Mostar, and was actually used in the fighting around Mostar in the Civil War in Yugoslavia. We brought 7 of these vehicles back in 1997. One of them is still at the back over there, which is going over into the Raccoon, which is going to the into diesel-powered vehicles by taking the American GAA Ford petrol engine out and fitting a V12 with a T34. So this vehicle is driving around on a T34 V12 power pack. The solar power, and of course they're that much cheaper to in America, has actually replaced the diesel engine and put the original petrol engine back in. We've decided that we're going to leave this vehicle in exactly this configuration because it is a unique vehicle and it's probably the only vehicle of its type that we're going to see in the West, because under the CFE treaty, the British Army are not allowed to bring back war trophies from the war in Bosnia because the war was never declared. So we have an example here of a vehicle which is the 1940s vehicle which has been converted in the 1960s by the Yugoslavs. Incidentally, before they put that rubber on, the glasses plate has 6 inches of concrete poured on top of the normal glasses plate, and then the rubber plate is actually, or the rubber sheeting is actually bolted directly to the glasses plate. The gears on the starter motor are not sinker meshed with the starter ring. And so when the starter motor is activated, often enough the starter motor does not turn the engine, so we have to flick the starter motor around until we can get the engine to engage. Yes, that's absolutely true, that towards the end of in the middle of the war, they started to simplify all their half-track production. And at the end of the war, they could produce twice as many vehicles at the same time, because they simplified whenever they could. And towards the end of the war, they actually went to dry pin tracks rather than these diesel rollers.
Technical discussions for a minute, just for a quick administrative announcement, if you like. Would the crews for the World War II submarine?
They thought that obviously there was a lot of vehicles destroyed during the fighting, but there was also many destroyed after the war because they didn't want people to see German engineering.
No, in fact, they gave the tooling for the BMW motorbikes to the Russians. I think they still produce Neighbour or something like that, they call it.
That's correct, yeah. And the other interesting thing is that the Opel factories, which were owned by General Motors, were never bombed during the Second World War, and those Opel factories in the Russian zones were dismantled and taken back to Russia as war trophies. Now the second vehicle into the arena is Barry Jameson. Good old Barry, he moves all my tanks for me. This particular vehicle is a Mach-No tractor unit, towing a 155mm M2A2 howitzer, one of the guns I brought back from Bosnia in December. I should have brought these guns back 3 years ago, and for some reason, I wonder why they never arrived on the ship, or never got to the ship, and they never arrived in the UK. Following the back and the big behind that, we have a Morris C8A. And then we have another Mac, NM6, I believe. I should be whizzing through the program and
recovery gear on the back. Fairly typical of the American Army recovered vehicles. Garwood, is it? Oh, again, I think correct.
No Garwood is there. So all those trucks with that kind of wrecker gear. So we have 3 Jeeps, 4 Jeeps, I beg your pardon, and then we have Malcolm driving his French marked Dodge command car. Malcolm's wife is French, so things to keep the peace in the family, the matrimonial home. He's finished the vehicle off as a French vehicle. So we have a D-Mag D7 driving around in front of us once again. I mentioned that the German, at the end of the war, the German motor industry was virtually destroyed by the Allies. But the funny thing is that it was free to keep that going during the winter of 1945, and now Volkswagen is one of the biggest manufacturers in the world. After the war, these guns were modified by NATO.
Any participants wanting to take part in this make their way into the arena now. Because we have
By NATO, and I think they were called the M107 or something like that. But when we bought these guns in Yugoslavia, I bring back these things because the sheer size of them, of course, they're not like a tank, you can't move them about easily. Going into the arena on the left-hand side is a Scammell R100, World War II artillery tractor.
So we're known as the coffee pot Scammell. Now I have heard it because of the header tank on the radiator, although Mr. Hunt, it's got more to do with the air cleaners. But anyway, these Scammell coffee pots were noted for their attached to the body. They've also got very high rear body work because they're fitted with a Scammell walking beam back axle. You'll notice there's only a single differential in the middle, although that's actually... Now, the Little Morris commercial, I understand all these cabs were known generically as alligator cabs because of the general look of them. They were designed basically to be about the simplest cab and metalwork you could build. All flat panels, all simple tin bashing.
Now behind the back of the gun is Morris Donkers from Holland in his Matador, which he rebuilt in his back garden over a period of 5 years.
Right, the originally the Associated Equipment Company of Southall in Middlesex. In military usage, almost all of them for the artillery tractors like the one you see here today. Also used by the RAF balloon winches, and I understand the Royal Navy had Matadors, 4-wheel drive, all fitted with the chassis-mounted winch. And as a result of that, many of them post-war saw their service with civilian companies, artillery tractor trim. And now we have a couple of those infamous Jeeps. Right, and I'm also told this is another stop in a 3-week tour of England. Usual vehicle, it's CL, that's a civilian specification of the Land Rover, by a landline or whatever. It can be pushed back onto its wheels, so I suspect you'll find that's also got armour plate mounted underneath. Following that, the lightweight or air portable Land Rover was originally designed to be slung under the Wessex helicopter. You'll notice... change that one. Righto. And the lightweight was designed, you'll notice most of them are actually fitted with a flat-ended axle plate rather than the pointed half-shaft end fitted to the standard vehicle. That's because they were also designed to be narrow enough to be stacked 2 abreast inside the hold of a Hercules transport aircraft, where Bob will tell you all I missed it. These vehicles, of course, available in both 12-volt general service and 24-volt FFR, or fitted for radio trim. You'll see the radio vehicle, at least one of the radio vehicles there. The big aerials on the roof are usually a dead giveaway. And then we have a modern, now that's the Land Rover entry into the truck utility meter.
We'll stop rattling on about Land Rovers for a minute because we have got 2 very interesting vehicles coming in front of us now. Both of them are UAZ. It is Russian built at the Ulyanovsk factory in Moscow. One of them you see ambulance version has got quite an interesting history. It was imported into this country in 1980. It was actually brought by St. John back in the days of the Iron Curtain. Very simple, basic, straightforward vehicles.
Now, I was actually just getting to this. That one, the 2 versions of the Alvis, 6-wheel drive, 4-wheel steer. The Alvis Saladin reconnaissance car and the Saracen. No, not the Saracen, what am I on about? It's the Stalwart. The amphibian, properly known as a high mobility load carrier. This one unusually fitted with the hub to you, aren't they, Bob? Yes. Very well. Right again. The RAF Mountain Rescue variant of the 110 Land Rover. I used actually to see the station wagon in military service. This one also fitted with the Rover V8.
Last few months. It was built by Marmont in France. It used it's just beating himself up. He managed that.
Yes, I have to confess, in deference to Bob, I did actually have one very unusual Sterling. Anyway, this RAF Mountain Rescue 110 was used as a personnel carrier. Basically, it was normally carried a crew of 5 or 6 mountain rescue personnel plus all their personal kit, although it is, of course, capable of operating a full 12-seater.
The Stalwart High Mobility Load Carrier was actually built and designed. Stalwart was that it would go with the Chieftain tanks and carry fuel and ammunition. Hence the high up on the back to actually transfer the
armoured personnel carrier starting. And first went into the arena the Humber Pig, very aptly named, also known as the Belfast Taxi. These things were introduced into service way back in the 1950s, based on the number 1 ton truck chassis. They just about reached the point of being pensioned off by the army when the trouble started flaring up in Northern Ireland. And as anything else was considered rather menacing, it was decided to sort of bring the van-like looking Humber Pig back into service. And it did stolen service in Northern Ireland.
Is there any truth in the rumour that they actually bought some of these back that they'd already sold off?
Personnel carrier, 6-wheel drive, permanent 6-wheel drive, on the similar principles of the Stalwart that you saw earlier on. And again, another veteran of the British Army. And passing just in front of the commentary box there, we have the GKN Saxon. Now this is an armoured personnel carrier stuck at its most basic, really. It's just, yes, I believe that's right, James. Simple Bedford diesel engine. I'm told by GKN that it survived the washing machine test. Now, the washing machine test for the uninitiated is something that was devised for the conditions in Hong Kong. Apparently the locals there, if they got a bit upset, used to fill washing machines on the concrete and tip out of tall buildings. And if an armoured personnel carrier could survive that, it was deemed fit for service in Hong Kong. An interesting vehicle just past the country box now. The Russian-built BTR 152. Now, this again is a very simple as armoured personnel carriers go. Built on a track chassis, at this time a 6151. Yeah, Mr. Flemming.
This particular vehicle we bought in 1989 from Israel, and if you look closely you'll see in the back there's lots of additional mounts for 50 caliber machine guns. This vehicle was part of the Butch collection for many years. We brought 2 of them back, and one was used. We're trying to remember the name of the film that was it was made. It was supposed to be Beirut anyway, the U.S. Marines not the U.S. Marines, the U.S. Marine Special Forces. Seavid, not Seavid, I don't know what they were.
PLC's decided now. Okay, very well.
I think that's just when he got all excited about there being more in G.I. Jane. He says he's never seen. I don't believe him. He says he's never seen G.I. Jane. Anyway, what we got now then, Bob?
What have we got now? Yeah, the last one in there, the 8x8 armoured personnel carrier GC. There's the BTR 60. Russian bird. It was basically the Russians' first attempt to do this. The propulsion system consists of 2 gas truck engines stuck side by side in the back, driving through 2 gearboxes, and it's as noisy as blazes inside. I can testify to
Just one thing, Bob. Most of these vehicles have a sort of code name, don't they? So that they don't.
That many years, I forgot it even had a turret on it. It's an OT-64 Scott SKOT. This particular vehicle was built in Czechoslovakia in the 1960s. It was co-produced by Poland and Czechoslovakia. Excuse me. It's an 8-wheel drive, pre-sight gearbox. The only trouble is, you can never find the damn gears. It's been sat up there for about 15 minutes while people have been trying to sort it out. It's got hydraulic clutch, which doesn't help either. A total of 18 infantrymen plus the crew of 3, so there's 21 people in this particular vehicle. It's a very large vehicle. It's on permanent roads and College of Science and Scrivener. As an example of a very large load-carrying, wheeled-armoured personnel carrier. Now it's actually going in Andy's
horrible thing in terms of driving position. You can end up with severe self-inflicted plastic surgery all over your face on position you can run through. Andy's treating you somewhat circumspectly at the moment. I'm just wondering if in fact he's just going to restart his own plate line.
When it was first designed in the 1960s, this vehicle was used. This vehicle was actually used only as a battle taxi to actually get the troops into battle. And in fact, you can see behind the turret there are 4 large bridges which open the troops to fire out of. Well, in 1962, the Poles decided to experiment and fit a turret to it. So they fitted this turret which had the 14.5 heavy machine gun in it. I think Andy's still having a few problems. He's going to make sure mechanically, because they really are a so-and-so, A to drive, B to maintain.
Post-war soft skins. So if there are any participant vehicles that would like to take part, if you'd like to make your way to the gateway, you're more than welcome. And first we have a Bedford RL around, and with some of the last shots in that well-known wartime film Ice Cold in Alex. There is also another anachronism in that there is a Series 1 Land Rover in the background there as well. But anyway, the Bedford RL, the post-war vehicle, Bedford M-type. Again, it's used a number of the components of the commercial vehicle, this goes to Bedford TK, including the cab, general service with the cab as top. And then following on from that, we have a lightweight mobile rover. I'm just saying that for Bob's benefit. The lightweight Land Rover, the Air Portable. This one in Royal Air Force trim. In fact, they did have at least 3 of these glider launchers. Now, what's that followed by then, please?
I'm taking the passengers vehicle, I have to say. It's, as we said, 6x6, it's a straight 6-cylinder diesel engine, a Taffer Duxford diesel, produces about 180 brake force in power output, and that makes it directly capacity on tarmac. This was a restoration project that the museum took so far, and for nobody here, it's led us straight on our vehicle today. So I'm very pleased to see it around at any rate. And climbing up over the hilltop now, I think that's Charlie Cage enjoying himself there with the Volvo Snowcat. That's peculiar vehicle of both of us. The steering on this is not steered by its tracks as a monotrack vehicle. This is steered by bending the entire vehicle over the 2 parts, the tractor front and the trailer back. Now we've got the army in on the outer gate with the Land Rover, so I'll gloss quickly over that before James starts getting excited again. That's followed by an M15.
In fact, they fitted these Rolls-Royce B40 engines to a top trial run of Series 1 Land Rovers. However, they found that they dragged or broke down more often and weren't.
Comments made earlier about the US government actually saying that the boats could not be sold out to civilian service. The last lot that came out in about 1994 were actually crushed by representatives of the US Army stood there. There's about 40 or 50 of these vehicles in a long row, and an M60 tank actually drove over the top of them and squashed everyone on the ground to make absolutely sure that nobody could buy them. And the same has been said about the Humvee. The Humvees are not to appear in private hands, and yet if you went to Belgium last week, you saw them for sale at £35,000 each. And we even saw them in Moscow 2 years ago, believe it or not, for sale in the Kazimierovskaya prospect.
any form of military vehicle, and so the American government refuses to let the missile go. They didn't realise when they made the announcement that this could be fired anywhere in the United States. They didn't realise how long it took to actually fuel a Scud missile, and in fact you need a crew of about 30 people altogether, as you can see if you go over the road. The other vehicles which are over there is a regimental signals post. I'm not sure exactly. That's the only place where you can see Second World War armour, Second World War aircraft, all the same locality.
Now, that is a fairly versatile piece of kit. It was designed originally armoured personnel carrier and transporter, and in fact it's proved its worth in all sorts of ways because it's proved to be fairly versatile. There's a number of vehicles being built onto that particular chassis, of which Big Fred that you see here is one. Driven by a V8 diesel. The next vehicle that came in after that has the lovely Russian name of Rustica, which means carnation. The Russians have a lovely habit of giving their artillery pieces the names of flowers and trees and so on. Very poetic was indeed. But again, the interesting thing here is that although you've got a 122mm howitzer built into a turret offset, the chassis and rudder gear again is that same basic MTLB. The third one, just past the commentary box now, is the Armoured Command and Reconnaissance Vehicle. Now, you can see that this one has an extra road wheel on each side. The chassis has been stretched very slightly, but again, it's that same MTLB chassis in this version. In the SO122, the Rustica, the Carnation, again, it's been boosted with a turbocharger. And in that particular configuration, I think it gives 320 brake wheels. The SO122 2S1, to give it its industrial number, the Carnation again. I think that's a family outing on that one. It's been driven today by, I think, by Vic Chilton. Looks like him peering out of the driver's cab. Yeah, it is. And daughter Laura is occupying the commander's seat up at the seat nearest to us up on top. Son Andrew is driving the OCRV. Yes, indeed. My first memory of him is of a very small boy, about 11 or 12, in a suit of overalls that was miles too big for him, inside the hull of a Cromwell, blasting away at it with a needle gun. So we do start him early here. James Fallis is driving the MCLB, or the Big Fred, exploring its braking characteristics. Entering the arena now is a reconnaissance vehicle, the PT-76. Now this is the Russian idea of building a light amphibious tank. And you have to say, well, to any waste, the armour is somewhat thin, but nevertheless it did the job, stayed in service with not only the Soviet forces, but all First entered service just after the Second World War. The engine is rather interesting because what they've done is they've taken half of the engine out of a T-34. That is one cylinder block, one cylinder head, probably one set of pistons, probably the crankshaft as well, routed around to a new crankcase, and there you have a straight 6, 240 horsepower engine. Now, just passing in front of the country box now, ZSU 23 Sure. Now, again, this is a piece of Russian poetry. This particular Shilka actually...
Spectacle is here at Duxford, and I can honestly say that you would not see this display of these types of armoured vehicles anywhere in the world except maybe in Soviet, a lot of the Soviet Union, who build their own vehicles, and of course now that they're joining NATO, they're actually phasing out these vehicles. So to see these types of Russian vehicles all driving around an arena together really is quite a unique sight. And if you notice, an awful lot of the wheels, tracks, they're all the same. I went over to Kuwait last year, and we inspected all the vehicles that were left, all the ex-Iraqi vehicles that were left after the war. And the 2S1, the 122mm gun we can see on the far side, which is just moving inside in front of the museum building now. The armour on that vehicle is so thin, we saw totally burned, not hundreds, but dozens of them totally burned out. There's not really any armour, no armour thickness on them at all. We're fortunate in as much as you may think that the vehicle drivers here get plenty of opportunity to drive them. In fact, they get very, very little opportunity to drive them. And in a way, it's good for ourselves because they're driving around the arena slowly because they're getting to know the feel of the vehicle, what the vehicle is capable of. For modern vehicles, which we will see later, which will go screaming around the arena, the drivers are quite confident in the capabilities. I think to see vehicles driving at this speed gives us more of an idea of what the vehicle looks like, sounds like, smells like. And over on the left-hand side of the arena is a nice little demonstration of recovery by a 9mm. It's another one of these vehicles that has to be the suspension and all the grease points have to be greased every 70 miles. And 70 miles, I've greased those things in North Wales in the snow, I've greased them down in South Wales, in the southwest of England, on Salisbury Plain.
It looks as though the casualty is the little GTMU, electronic countermeasures, particular to carry out this particular function. Anyway, disgrace of disgraces, now leaving the arena, towed backwards by the scaffold.
They reckon actually, don't they, that would be, if you happen to be flying above that, it would be equally fatal to human beings as to proximity. It must be right then. Hang on a moment, I'll just ask Martin, our consulting electronics engineer out there. It is a Faraday cage, yes, I'm getting the thumbs up.
And now we have the tracked armoured personnel. FV432, armoured personnel carrier. The first one is one of the earliest series with the petrol engine, and I think that second one is, the second one looks to be, the second one is a petrol engine as well. Rolls-Royce B80 series petrol engine, produces about 190 horsepower, and that's coupled to an Allison transmission, which makes it, all in all, it makes for a very easy vehicle to drive, but also quite an unpleasant vehicle to operate in. A friend of mine did a stint in the army with an infantry regiment, and he said one of their least favourite experience was being transported around in one of the early Mark 432s. Wearing that turret, you wear it like a hat. It houses a straightforward GPMG general purpose machine gun. Passing the commentary box now, we have a diesel 432. Now, in the late 60s, GKM for engine. Now, by multi-fuel, what we mean essentially is diesel. A multi-fuel engine is supposed to run on anything from petrol to palm oil. forget that. You lose so much power running it on petrol, it's just not worth it. So that still leaves you in a reasonable range. You could run it on diesel, aviation turbine fuel, ordinary heating oil, anything you can lay in.
Land Rovers at one stage as well.
They did, James. We'll draw a veil over that. Suffice to say, it wasn't a very successful experiment, said he, rubbing it in good and hard. I'm on Bob Flemming's side at the moment. Just at the moment.
Well, I have to say in defence of Land Rovers here, I go again. But we used to take ours from Retford all the way down to Salisbury Plain. We used to drive all over the plain, scavenging parts for tanks, pulling out tracks for all British cruiser tanks and the like, and then drive back 200 miles back to Retford. It never let us down, so there must be something for them. But I was always bagging my elbows in the damn things. Right, going around the arena, we've had two of them, but I don't know much about them, to be honest.
Well, the bit I know is that they call a self-propelled gun as opposed to a tank, because the difference is that a tank can be fired on the move and a self-propelled gun can't.
Possibly dig yourself in and when as soon as it's finished firing from that position, the gun is lowered back into its crane, which you see by the driver there, and locked in that position, and it then moves on to a new position. Going down the back straight of the arena at the moment is my favourite British track vehicle, the AFV 434.
Rock and roll.
I think Mr. Flemming gets quite excited by those as well.
That's a real machine. You can do anything with that. It's a superb piece of kit. You can lift engines out, you can repair things, you can run generators. The most wonderful piece of kit.
Well, you would know this better than I do, actually. Am I right to think is that the MOD is actually trying to buy something back by the world?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. One of the comments made before about the Abbott's and self-propelled guns, one of my many tasks, or one of my many onerous tasks, I'm the editor of the Tracklink magazine, which is the magazine of the French Royal, who was served for many, many years in the Royal Artillery with the Abbott, and he was saying that in his 10 or 15 years with the Abbott, only once did they ever use the Abbott in an anti-tank role. In other words, the gun is actually fired in the horizontal position. And he said it was very, very frightening because, of course, the breech comes right back into the back of the turret. But the vehicle was never really designed for that. In an emergency, it can be used in an anti-tank role, just like the old 3.7 anti-aircraft gun of the Second World War. It could be used in an emergency.
Yeah, that's exactly right, James. Most of them come as a complete pack, perfectly, you just undo so many bolts. Most of the modern vehicles, the electrical connections, hydraulic connections, and all the rest of it are quick release cap actors to do a complete pack change on something like a 432, 434, an Abbott, or even on a Chieftain.
In fact, if you go over to the Ruby display alongside the museum there, you will actually see the Ruby changing packs. And in fact, yesterday afternoon they took a pack out of one of the 432s. In fact, I think it's the one that's about to drive, about to go over the knife edge now. They took the pack out of that, replaced it within less than an hour, put it back, and it was driving around the arena. I brought 50 Second World War vehicles back in the past 2 years or 3 years. If I didn't do it, they'd just get scrapped. We'd never see them again. Which a lot of people would love. Certainly the President of the United States, his wife would love to see all these things cut up into scrap.
Right, now entering the arena now, we have a family of vehicles. The first one disappearing, or popping up out of the trench at the far end there by the apron of the workshop, is the Scorpion light tank. Entered service ran in about 1970, driven today by Simon Parkinson. You can recognise his style of driving anywhere. The armour is mostly aluminium, so it gives it a very light weight. You can stick two of these inside the hand of a Hercules. They tip the scales just under 8 tons. The engine is the Jaguar car engine. So all of those of you who like listening to the nice purr of the Jaguar engine, just feast your ear holes now. It's been derated slightly for military service, produces about 190 brake horsepower in this configuration, but it still gives the Scorpion an extremely lively turn of speed. In its day, it's reckoned to be, it might still be the fastest vehicle in tracks in service anywhere in the world. When it's used in the reconnaissance role, to be able to put up something of a fight if it has to fight for the information it's trying to gain.
I have to be a bit political about these vehicles because I believe these vehicles in a modern war would survive just as long as the Mark VI Vickers did in the desert in the Second World War. They wouldn't survive a fighting war for more than 10 minutes. They're too small, they're too lightly armed.
Yes, I think others would probably have a few things to say about that, but at the same time, yes, I think you have a point. I mean, I remember these things are built substantially of aluminium armour, and one thing I remember from my time in industry was that aluminium ignites at 611 degrees C, and look what's happened to it in a Sheffield versus Falklands War. So, okay, yes, you've got resistance to small arms fire, splinters, and so on, but anything like high explosive anti-tank, no, they wouldn't last very long. I think I'd
Extend, they just have to scrap them all because the chassis just cracked apart and had to buy American M113s.
I think it'd be fair to say, on a historical note, wouldn't it, that every time a light tank has actually been put to the test, there was impulsively built light tanks during World War II, but none of theirs were ever a great success. I think it would be fair to say that history is probably against the light tank.
You're at the top.
Going into the arena now. Andy Hutchison, our chairman, has come out for another play, and I don't blame him. What a vehicle to play with. Where else in Britain when you see one of these? BMD-1, air portable infantry combat vehicle. Designed to be loaded onto pallets and transported in aircraft, or you can drive it straight at the door of Antonov and run it out again at the other end. This one came from the MOD at Chertsey, and the deal was if we could get it running, we could have it for our show. Well, we got it running, and here it is running in our show. And all credit to John Wood, who's over there somewhere today, and Monty Roberts, who fought like days to get it running today.
This is followed by BMP-1. This is the BMP actually stands in Russian, it actually stands for Armoured Personnel Carrier. And this is an armoured personnel carrier which totally revolutionised armoured personnel carrying tactics. It's followed by the BMP-2, which is simply a BMP-1 with a larger turret with a 30mm cannon, as opposed to the 76mm smoothbore cannon of the BMP-1. And people in the Soviet Union and in Eastern Europe tell me the BMP is probably one of the best armoured vehicles you can possibly drive. I've never had the opportunity yet. I'm hoping to one of these days. And BMD. Again, unless you're in the Soviet Union in Russia, maybe even in possibly Czechoslovakia or Poland.
So that you see coming across the arena now, heading towards the military college of science at Shrewsbury. And I think it's being driven by Ripley, otherwise known as the Biscuit Monster. You don't need a tin of biscuits anywhere near this bloody. There's a
to Shrewsbury because I was not allowed as a private individual to own a BMP-2, and so this vehicle was obtained by myself on behalf of the Royal British College of Science, and the Germans quite happily gave it to us because it was another vehicle off their CFE list.
There's the two BMPs. I mean, the BMP-1, when it was introduced, there was an awful lot of heart surgery among the Soviet military. This, after all, was a vehicle which was a whole new concept for them, the infantry carrying vehicle. It's a vehicle which is intended to be able to carry the infantry almost onto their objective and then provide fire support when it gets there. Being driven today by Dave Ball, one of our old-time members. And Marta was introduced entered service with the Bundeswehr in the late 1960s. And I won't say it was a revolutionary vehicle, other people were working towards the same objective at the same time. But 8mm Rheinmetall, 20mm Rheinmetall, You can stow about, let me see, I'm trying to remember this now, I think it's about 8 bodies inside the thing plus the crew. Now, this one I laughingly refer to as the engineer marder, because a team of us went over to Shrivenham to see if we could actually get this thing running, get the engine running on this, but we didn't get the engine running. The door on the back of the crew compartment drops down, and I'll tell you what, if you start up in emergency reverse, with that door dropped down, it suddenly becomes an ace bulldozer blade. I wonder if they've repaired that door at Shrivenham yet.
Holes cut inside the armour plate. But there's no other country in the world uses the Marder except, of all places, Argentina. And they produced a tank called the TAM, the T-A-M. And what they did was, there's a German company, I think it was Rheinmetall, actually designed a tank turret which they fitted onto the armoured personnel carrier with a 105mm gun. So the TAM tank is in fact a Marder with a tank. Diverse countries as the Canadian Army, the Australian Army, the Greek, the Turk Army. Most NATO armies have not allowed to dispose of them. They can only be disposed of to a company or to an individual or organisation that the West German government actually approves of. 55s.
Yeah, the T-55 claims the distinction along with its immediate predecessor, the T-54, being the most numerous tank produced anywhere in the world. Something like, I think, about 96,000 units produced. Now you imagine if you were a German executive, would you just dream of producing 96,000 T-54s and T-55s? Following in behind that is Phil Aldridge with his own tank. I say his own tank, it was the tank he had when he was in the army, Centurion, which was adapted later on in his career for artillery. Going back to the T-55 problem for a moment. Oh, well done, Barry, you had the fence. Well, they had to come down sometime anyway. That same diesel engine that we mentioned earlier on, that appears in the T-34, the old T-34, operated in this case to 585 horsepower, which was quite enough for it for a tank of that size and capacity in its day, although it was fairly puny now.
You see going around in front of you, that cost me $5,000 delivered to the port of Gdynia and actually put on the ship. And that vehicle came from Czechoslovakia and all it wanted to fight a war was fuel and ammunition. £5,000. That was the good old days.
Just past in front of the commentary box, busy converting fuel into miles. There's Conqueror. Heaviest tank the British Army ever operated. One of that's for 65 tons, or something it's supposed to be. Now by the time it's fully fitted out, you probably add a few more onto that. 120mm gun, American built gun, decide to carry it through. And it caused one or two questions to be asked by the MOD themselves. What was this doing here? So we thought it might almost put it there.
Vickers developed the Chieftain tank with the German MTU diesel engine from the Leopard 2. 30% better performance all round. The Challenger 2, they also put the German MTU diesel in the Challenger 2, and they got the same 20 to 25% increase in performance all the way around. And in fact, the Chieftain with the German MTU diesel engine in was called the Chieftain 2000. And quite recently, just before Christmas, the Vickers had to dispose of their Chieftain 2000. It was going to cost them £4,000 to put it up. So they gave us a telephone call and they said, if you'll come and take it away, you can have it. It cost